Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation of identity negotiation theory and prison. I want to start this off with the face of identity negotiation theory, and that's Ting Tomey. She defines identity as an individual's multifaceted identity of cultural, ethnic, religion, social class, gender, sexual orientation, professional, and personal images of self-reflection. We tend to conform to a group or society we surround ourselves with. Once a relationship is established, people's identities reflect their mutual expectations, obligations, and indeed the very nature of their relationship. I want to go over a few objectives, a brief overview. Why I did this paper is I wanted to understand why identities change and whether this change can be detected or even measured in a prison setting. Are these changes temporary or permanent? How pre-prison identity affects the individual. What kind of environment would be needed to trigger such identities? Now, I want to talk about identity negotiation and how it affects people. The same man, for example, can be warm with his family, cold with his co-workers, and a mixture of both with his in-laws, meaning one person can have many identities but know which one to pull it out depending on the interaction. Many scholars have dug into the identity negotiation theory to better understand and find other forms of communication. One scholar is Irving Goffman. He's one of the best known sociologists of the 21st century. He laid the foundation for theories of identity as they have developed in communication. I like his theory. It explains everyday situations are viewed as a stage, and people are actors who use performances to make an impression on an audience. He continues, when you enter a situation, you essentially ask, what is going on here? In prison, every day is a struggle to impress your audience, and with consistent replacements and inmates transferring, you have new actors to impress daily. Another scholar I thought was important is Erickson. He developed the Erickson tradition, which views identity as an ongoing dynamic process whereby individuals establish, evaluate, reevaluate, and reestablish their identities, and it is not a relative to others in their environment. This tradition also works in the prison setting. From the moment they walk in the institution, they establish an identity, evaluate if it works for them, reevaluate identity, again depending on what group or gang they fit in, and reestablish their identity in that group or gang. Now, when a person thinks about negotiation, identity is not a word that comes to mind. When you name an individual a criminal, you give them a title of a negative background, and that can carry with an individual. Now, the institution and all across the United States has mandatory classes these inmates are to participate in before release, and it is to help them reintegrate back into society and also help them with those negative identifiers and thoughts. At the end of an inmate sentence, it's really they're never going to get their identity back, their pre-prison identity. He can never remain the same person he was before he came to prison. Now, I listed 3 identifiers I felt were more important in a prison setting: race, gender, and religion. Race is an ethnic identifier or a racial identifier whereby individuals link their racial and ethnic group members to their thoughts, feelings, and expressions regarding the self. Gender is transgender, gay, men who are vulnerable and highly susceptible to rape. Now, gender is important because we all know there are individuals out there who do not identify with their born gender, and that can play a risky role in the prison environment. Religion is also important because it's a identifier that I see a lot of inmates take. It helps them cope. It helps them deal with the environment, forget about things that have happened in the past, and it also helps them become a better person. I highly recommend that identifier. Now, I did question 6 inmates from the Belmont Correctional institution. I've been a correctional officer there for 6 years. I interact with these inmates on a daily basis, and I find it very interesting to see how their identities change depending on what pod or dorm they are assigned to. Now, these inmates are dealing with loss, fear, shame, guilt, and innocence, mixed in with people that are violent, maturity levels are not quite there. So as you can see, you have a mixture of identities, and they can clash and collide, and some people hold on to the negative ones and they release their pre-prison identity to kind of fit in with the group that will accept them, essentially. It's not all the time what group they want to be in, but what group will accept them. Now, the participants were 3 white males. One is straight, one is gay, one is transgender, two African Americans, one's gay, one's straight, and one of Hispanic descent who happened to be Filipino. Now, the questions that I asked were, describe your identity, race, gender, religion, and ethnic background. Do you think how you project your identity in this environment is different than how you project it on the outside? Has being incarcerated changed your identity, and when did you realize it? And have you ever lied about your identity, which happens a lot in prison, but are they willing to admit that? I was curious myself. The answers shocked me. The majority of these inmates said that they don't change who they are the same person, they're not fake. That right there tells me that's an identifier. They identify with the environment already because they are lying to me. Because I've seen time and time again that inmates do change, individuals do change once they come to prison. It is a proven fact. They begin their sentence with only a vague, incomplete image of what prison is like. They come in here not wanting to change their identity or knowing it will happen, but it essentially does happen over time. Identity negotiation theory can be measured in a prison setting with an elapsed time of study, measuring different prison levels. A level 5 prison, where you have your hardened criminals, and down to a level 1 and 2, where you have your inmates that don't cause a lot of problems. And a mixture of identities amongst the inmate population. With a few exceptions, their self-dialogues involve feelings of vulnerability, disconnect, and difference from other inmates. Emotions that reflect both the degradation and deprivation of institutional life and their continuing outsider's perspective on this prison world. Applying identity negotiation theory to the context of crime, we propose that deviant people have a moral and a criminal identity. These identities differ in the extent to which they impose rule compliance. When an inmate's concern about his identity first emerged, there is little that he can do about them. Because of the environment that it's in, it kind of controls who they are. They are not themselves once they're in there, and they know that. But they're okay with that because they don't want to be that person, that father behind bars. So an inmate is okay with changing their identity while incarcerated. But what they don't realize is it's hard to change back once you get out. An inmate is able to express both directions of his ambivalence by drawing a distinction between his true identity and a false identity he creates for the prison world. For most of the inmate's prison career, his pre-prison identity remains a subjective or a personal identity, while his prison identity serves as his objective or social basis for interaction in prison. Now, I found 2 models of identity that I thought were important as well. The indigenous model analyzes of total institutions, where in entry, prisoners experience a painful and systematic mortification of self, resulting from a series of ritualized degradations. According to scholars, the pains of imprisonment, the deprivation of liberty, goods, and services heterosexual relationships, anatomy, and security all contribute to the mortification process. Mortification process meaning change in identity. The recording of existence argues that prisoners developed an inmate code of value, which governs social relationships within the prison. Now, the code is don't snitch, don't talk to COs, don't be feminine, don't you must maintain loyalty while you're in there. These are different codes that help mold their identity while they're in there. If they were an individual pre-prison that did not like to socialize or hold secrets or didn't want to be part of a negative environment, whereas they were around negative people, well, they are now, and they need to conform to that to survive. Everything they do from entry on is to survive, and I think it's just human nature as well. So identity negotiation is definitely important, because I think not only in a prison setting, but as well in life, it's a survival tool. It's what we do to help us interact with individuals to fit in. We want to fit in. There's a sense of belonging, and our identity negotiation between ourselves helps us. So I hope you liked my presentation and you have a better understanding of identity negotiation and prison setting. That is it for now. Have a good evening.